My children only visited when they wanted money, their smiles fading the moment I turned away from my wealth. After years of feeling like a mere bank account to them, I made a decision that shocked everyone. I left my entire fortune to the cleaner who treated me with kindness. Sometimes, the heart knows where true loyalty lies, and it's not always with blood. Before I dive into the details of this unexpected journey, let me know where you're watching from and make sure to like the video to support me. On a late afternoon, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Bennett estate, casting long shadows across the polished floors and antique furnishings. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of a grand clock in the hallway, its steady rhythm marking time that felt both endless and fleeting. Mr. Harold Bennett sat alone in his study, a room lined with shelves heavy with leather-bound books and photographs of a life once bustling with family gatherings and laughter. Now, those memories seemed like echoes from a distant world. Harold's fingers traced the rim of a crystal glass resting on the side table, but the amber liquid inside remained untouched. His gaze drifted toward the window, where the manicured garden stretched out beneath a sky slowly dimming toward twilight. The estate looked as grand as ever, a symbol of decades of hard work and success, yet inside, Harold felt a growing emptiness that no wealth could fill. He had spent a lifetime building this legacy, a testament to his rise from modest beginnings to the heights of business achievement. Yet, as he reflected on the past weeks, a bitter truth gnawed at him: his children seemed more interested in the promise of inheritance than in his company. Visits from them had become increasingly infrequent and, when they did come, their smiles were thin, their questions focused on the value of his estate or the details of his will. Genuine warmth was scarce, replaced by a transactional coldness that stung more deeply than any argument. Just last week, his eldest son, Richard, had appeared at the front door unannounced, his voice polite but distant. "Father, I wanted to discuss the stock portfolios and the timing of the trust fund distributions," Richard had said, barely glancing at the photos lining the hallway. No inquiry about Harold's health, no recollection of shared memories, just business. Harold had forced a smile, masking the hurt that tightened his chest. His daughter, Elaine, had called a few days later, her tone clipped and hurried. "Dad, I'm swamped with work, but I wanted to remind you about the property taxes due next month." "I'll arrange the payment," she said before quickly ending the call. The cold efficiency of her words left Harold feeling like a ledger entry rather than a father. As he sat in the silence, Harold's mind wandered to earlier days when the house was filled with the sounds of childhood and family dinners. The laughter of his children at the dinner table, the scent of his wife's cooking, the comforting embrace of shared stories by the fireplace. Those moments felt like treasures buried beneath the weight of years and the growing distance that now defined their relationships. The sting of loneliness was sharpest in the evenings, when the grand estate, for all its beauty, felt cavernous and cold. He would wander from room to room, touching the furniture his hands had chosen, looking at the portraits of ancestors whose lives had shaped the family name. Yet, none of that seemed to matter to the children who now visited only when there was financial gain to be had. Harold's thoughts were interrupted by the soft knock on the door. It was Maria, the family's longtime cleaner, a woman who had been part of the household for more than 2 decades. Unlike his children, she approached him with warmth and respect, her presence a balm to his aching heart. "Mr. Bennett, I thought you might like some tea," she said gently, stepping inside with a tray carefully balanced in her hands. Harold smiled, a genuine warmth flickering in his eyes. "Thank you, Maria. That would be lovely." She placed the cup on the desk and sat in the chair opposite him. "It's been a quiet day, hasn't it?" she said softly, as if understanding the unspoken weight he carried. "It has," Harold admitted. "Sometimes, this house feels more like a museum than a home. Full of memories, but empty of the people who made them meaningful." Maria nodded, her eyes kind and steady. "You've built a remarkable life here, Mr. Bennett. And not just the estate or the business. You've created a legacy in the way you've treated people. That counts for something." Her words stirred something in him, a faint hope amid the loneliness. For years, Maria had been a steady presence, not just cleaning rooms but listening, offering companionship without judgment. She had never asked for anything beyond respect, and in return, she gave genuine kindness. Harold took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. It's hard, Maria. Watching my children come and go like strangers. They see this house as a prize, a means to an end, not as the home where they grew up, where love was supposed to be unconditional. Maria reached out, placing her hand over his. Sometimes, the people we expect to be there aren't, but that doesn't mean you're alone. You have those of us who care for you as a person, not for what you have. He looked at her, grateful for the rare connection that had bloomed quietly over the years. You've been a true friend, Maria. More than I ever expected. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of a car pulling up the driveway. Harold glanced toward the window, his heart sinking as the familiar figures of his children emerged from the vehicle. Richard and Elaine were back again, their faces set in polite masks, their eyes scanning the room as if measuring the value of what surrounded them. Harold stood, smoothing his jacket, trying to summon the patience he knew he would need. The doorbell rang, and Maria quietly left to attend to her duties, leaving Harold to face the inevitable. The front door opened, and Richard stepped in first, his voice clipped but courteous. Father, good to see you. Elaine and I thought we'd come by to discuss some matters regarding the estate. Harold nodded slowly, masking the disappointment that tightened his throat. Of course. Please, sit. They settled in the drawing room, the conversation quickly turning to stocks, properties, and legal arrangements. The warmth of family was absent, replaced by cold calculations and veiled impatience. Harold listened as they debated the timing of asset transfers and the management of the family trust, their words sharp and businesslike. When he tried to steer the conversation toward memories or plans beyond money, they brushed him off with a polite smile and a quick change of subject. As the meeting drew to a close, Richard offered a tight-lipped smile. We'll be in touch soon, Father. It's important to keep things moving smoothly. Harold forced a nod, watching as they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. After the door closed behind them, the silence returned, deeper and heavier than before. Harold sank into the armchair by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows across the room. He felt the bitter sting of isolation, a man surrounded by wealth but starved for genuine connection. He thought again of Maria's words and the kindness she had shown. Maybe, he mused, the true value of his life was not in the fortune he had amassed but in the relationships that had stood the test of time, the ones built on respect, care, and authenticity. For now, the estate was his sanctuary and his prison, a place that held the echoes of a family that had once been whole and the quiet hope that perhaps, in the days ahead, something real could still grow from the cracks. Days drifted by in the vast Bennett estate, each one marked by the same quiet loneliness that had settled like a shadow over Harold's life. The house remained grand and immaculate, yet the absence of warmth gnawed at him more with every passing hour. His children's visits were sporadic and shallow, their conversations revolving solely around finances and legalities. Harold found himself retreating further into his own thoughts, wrestling with a growing sense of abandonment and the stark realization that wealth had not guaranteed him the family he had once dreamed of. One afternoon, as the golden afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains, Harold sat in the drawing room, flipping through an old photo album. The pages were filled with images of birthdays, holidays, and family milestones, smiling faces frozen in time. His hands trembled slightly as he traced the outline of his children's younger selves. In those moments, they had been innocent and full of promise, unaware of the distance that would later grow between them. A soft knock at the door broke his reverie. Maria appeared in the doorway, her warm smile a comforting presence in the quiet house. I thought you might like some fresh lemonade, Mr. Bennett, she said, carrying a tray with a pitcher and 2 glasses. Thank you, Maria, Harold replied, his voice tinged with gratitude. You always seem to know what I need. She entered and set the tray down on the table beside him. Sometimes, a little sweetness helps soften the day, she said gently, settling into the chair across from him. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, the soft hum of the estate's old heating system the only sound. Harold looked up, meeting Maria's steady gaze. You've been with this family for so long. You've seen it all, the good times and the difficult ones. Maria nodded thoughtfully. I have. And I've seen how hard it is to feel truly seen and valued, especially when people get caught up in what they want rather than who they are. Harold sighed deeply, the weight of years pressing down on him. I've come to realize that wealth can't buy the things that matter most: love, loyalty, genuine connection. My children, they only come when there's something to gain. It's a hard truth to face. Maria reached out, placing a reassuring hand over his. You deserve better than that, Mr. Bennett. You deserve people who care for you, not for your fortune. Her words stirred a flicker of something long dormant within Harold, a yearning for authentic companionship that transcended the trappings of wealth. Over the years, Maria had been a constant in his life, offering kindness without expectation, a rare and precious gift. I've been thinking, Harold began slowly, about making some changes. About how I want to ensure that those who truly care for me are recognized, not just those who see dollar signs. Maria's eyes widened slightly, curiosity mingling with hope. What kind of changes? He hesitated, then continued, I'm considering revising my will. Perhaps leaving a substantial part of my estate to you, Maria. You've been a loyal friend and more. It feels right to reward that kind of devotion. Maria's hand tightened gently around his. Mr. Bennett, I'm honored, but you must know, I've never expected anything from you beyond kindness. Harold smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting for the first time in weeks. That's what makes it real. I want my legacy to reflect the people who've been there through thick and thin, not just the ones who happen to share my blood. Their conversation was interrupted by the soft chime of the doorbell. Maria glanced toward the window. I think your daughter, Elaine, is here. Harold's heart tightened. The prospect of another visit from his children filled him with a mixture of resignation and quiet dread. Would you mind checking, Maria? I'd like a moment to prepare. She nodded and left the room. Moments later, Elaine entered, her expression guarded but polite. Father, she began, I wanted to discuss the upcoming charity gala and the donations you pledged. Harold gestured for her to sit. Of course, Elaine. But before we talk about that, I've been reflecting on the importance of loyalty and genuine care. Elaine raised an eyebrow, clearly puzzled. What do you mean? I mean, Harold said carefully, that I'm considering some changes to my will. I want to ensure that those who have stood by me, who have shown true kindness, are recognized. Elaine's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion flickering across her face. Are you suggesting that you might leave some of the estate to someone other than your children? Harold nodded slowly. Yes. I want to reward those who truly care for me as a person, not just for my assets. Elaine's posture stiffened. Father, I hope you understand that this could cause serious family strife. We are your children. It's our birthright. Birthright, Harold echoed, is not always the same as deserving. He met her gaze steadily. I'm tired of feeling like an object to be fought over. I want to make a choice that reflects my values. Elaine's mouth pressed into a thin line. I'll have to speak with Richard about this. Harold nodded, the weight of the confrontation settling heavily between them. I understand. After Elaine left, Harold sank back into his chair, exhaustion washing over him. Maria returned quietly, sensing the tension that lingered in the air. You're making difficult decisions, she said softly. Yes, Harold replied, but necessary ones. I can no longer ignore the truth of my relationships. Over the next weeks, Harold and Maria's bond deepened. They spent afternoons in the garden, sharing stories and memories, finding comfort in each other's presence. Maria's unwavering support offered Harold a reprieve from the cold indifference of his children. One afternoon, as they sat beneath an ancient oak tree, Harold looked at Maria with newfound clarity. You've been more than an employee or a friend. You've been family. Maria smiled, a warmth radiating from her eyes. And you've been like a father to me in many ways. Harold reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, worn notebook. I've started writing down my thoughts, my plans for the future. I want to make sure everything is clear and fair. Maria leaned in to read a few lines. This is brave of you, Harold. To take control and decide what matters. He nodded. It's time I stop living for others' expectations and live for what feels right to me. As the days passed, Harold's resolve grew stronger. He began consulting with his lawyer, carefully crafting a new will that reflected his intentions. The process was both daunting and liberating, a step toward reclaiming his own life and legacy. Through it all, Maria remained a steadfast presence, offering encouragement and companionship. For the first time in years, Harold felt a glimmer of hope that even in the twilight of his life, he could still find connection, meaning, and the courage to stand for what he believed in. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the estate in a warm, amber glow, Harold sat beside Maria on the veranda. The air was filled with the scent of blooming roses and the distant chirping of crickets. Thank you, Maria, he said quietly. For being here when I needed someone most. She squeezed his hand gently. You're not alone, Harold. And you never will be. In that moment, surrounded by the fading light and the quiet strength of true friendship, Harold felt a peace he had long sought. The path ahead was uncertain, but with Maria by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The morning sun filtered softly through the lace curtains of Harold Bennett's study as he sat at his aged oak desk, hands folded over the freshly printed documents before him. The new will lay open, a deliberate and carefully crafted declaration of where his fortune would go. His pulse quickened with a mixture of resolve and apprehension. Today, he would share the decision that had been weighing on his heart for weeks. Maria entered quietly, carrying a tray with tea and a plate of scones. She placed them gently on the desk, offering a warm smile that steadied him. Are you ready, Harold? She asked softly. He nodded, taking a slow sip of the warm tea. Yes. It's time. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the hall. Moments later, Richard and Elaine appeared in the doorway of the study, their expressions polite but guarded. Harold rose slowly, meeting their eyes with a quiet firmness that surprised even himself. Father, Richard began, clearing his throat, we received word that you wanted to see us. Yes, Harold replied, gesturing for them to sit. I have something important to discuss, something you should know. Elaine exchanged a glance with her brother, their posture stiffening with a shared unease. What is this about? Elaine asked cautiously. Harold took a deep breath, steadying his voice. I've revised my will. After much thought, I have decided to leave the majority of my estate to Maria. The room fell into a heavy silence. Richard's eyes narrowed, disbelief flickering across his face. Maria? The housekeeper? Harold met his son's incredulous gaze without wavering. Yes. Maria has been a loyal friend and a constant source of kindness through the years. She has treated me with respect and compassion, unlike the transactional relationships I've experienced with my own children. Elaine's voice rose slightly, tinged with anger. This isn't just about loyalty, Father. This is about our birthright. We are your children. You can't just disregard us like this. Harold's jaw tightened, the hurt beneath his resolve surfacing. I'm not disregarding you. I'm acknowledging the truth. For too long, this house has been a place of business to you, not home. I refuse to let my legacy be governed solely by blood, especially when that blood has been stained by greed. Richard stood abruptly, pacing the room with clenched fists. You're making a mistake. This will tear the family apart. We can fight this. Harold's voice grew steady, imbued with newfound strength. I am prepared for that. I have spoken with my lawyer, and everything is in order. This is my decision. Elaine's eyes flashed with frustration. You're being manipulated, Father. Maria has taken advantage of your kindness. Harold shook his head. Maria has never taken anything from me except friendship. It's you who have come with demands and conditions. I will not be intimidated. Maria, who had remained seated quietly, finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Bennet has always treated me with dignity. I have never sought to exploit him. This decision is his alone." Richard's face darkened. "We'll see what the courts say about that." Harold stood tall, feeling a surge of empowerment. For the first time in years, he was reclaiming control over his life and his legacy. "I welcome that. I am ready to defend what is right." The tension in the room was palpable, a storm of betrayal, anger, and defiance swirling between them. Yet beneath it all, Harold felt a quiet satisfaction. He had spoken his truth, refused to be a passive victim of circumstance. As Richard and Elaine left the study, their parting words were laced with threats and warnings, but Harold remained unmoved. The battle lines had been drawn, but he was no longer afraid. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the estate, Harold sat with Maria in the garden. The flowers swayed gently in the warm breeze, the air filled with the scent of jasmine and earth. "Thank you for standing by me today," Harold said softly, reaching for her hand. Maria smiled, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "You stood for yourself, Harold. I was just here to support you." He squeezed her hand gently. "This is more than support. It's a new chapter. I'm done living for others' expectations." Maria nodded. "And you're not alone anymore." Harold looked out across the garden, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. The confrontation had been difficult, painful even, but it marked a turning point. He had chosen loyalty and love over obligation and greed. That night, as he lay in his bedroom, the weight of uncertainty still lingered. The coming days would bring challenges, no doubt, but Harold faced them with a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to fight, not just for his estate, but for dignity, respect, and the truth of what family should mean. In the quiet darkness, a single thought echoed in his mind: this was his life, his legacy, and he would shape it on his own terms. The days that followed the revelation of Harold Bennet's new will were heavy with tension and quiet upheaval. The grand estate, once a sanctuary of memories, now felt like a battleground where the fractures within the family deepened with every passing hour. Harold noticed it first in the subtle shifts: the curt phone calls from Richard, the cold glances from Elaine when she stopped by unannounced, and the whispered conversations that halted abruptly whenever he entered the room. His children's resentment was palpable, a thick fog that settled over the once familiar spaces of the house. One morning, as Harold sat in the sunroom sipping his coffee, Maria entered with a stack of mail. Among the usual bills and letters lay a thick envelope marked with the insignia of a law firm. "More letters from your children's attorneys, I presume?" Maria asked gently, setting the pile down beside him. Harold nodded, his expression weary. "Yes. They're contesting the will. Claiming undue influence, incapacity, and every legal tactic they can muster." Maria's eyes softened with sympathy. "It's unfair, Harold. But they're afraid of losing what they think is theirs." He sighed deeply. "I never imagined it would come to this, fighting my own blood in court. But I won't back down." Over the next few weeks, the estate became a hub of legal activity. Meetings with lawyers filled Harold's days, each session peeling back layers of family grievances and exposing raw wounds that had long been hidden beneath polite facades. Despite the storm, Maria remained a steadfast presence. She arranged the house with care, prepared meals that brought small comforts, and offered a listening ear when Harold's spirits faltered. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Harold confided, "It's hard to reconcile the family I once knew with the one before me now. Their greed blinds them to the man I am, to the love I gave." Maria reached out, squeezing his hand. "You've shown incredible strength. Not everyone would stand firm in the face of such betrayal." Her words buoyed him, a reminder that even amid loss, there were connections that endured. News of the dispute began to ripple beyond the walls of the estate. Neighbors and acquaintances whispered about the Bennet family's discord, sparking conversations about the nature of inheritance, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. One afternoon, Harold received a letter from a local community center, expressing support and admiration for his decision to honor genuine relationships over blood ties. The message warmed his heart, a small beacon of hope in a difficult time. As the legal battle loomed, Harold found solace in his growing friendship with Maria. They spent afternoons walking the gardens, sharing stories of their lives and dreams. In her company, he rediscovered a sense of peace and belonging that had eluded him for years. During one such walk, Maria suggested, "When this is all over, perhaps we could create something meaningful together. A place where people like us, those who've been overlooked or forgotten, can find community and support." Harold's eyes lit up at the idea. A sanctuary for those who need it most. "I like that." Their plans began to take shape in quiet conversations, visions of a foundation dedicated to helping hardworking individuals, a legacy built not on wealth alone, but on compassion and integrity. Amid the uncertainty, Harold felt a renewed purpose blossoming. The fight with his children was painful, but it also clarified what mattered most: kindness, loyalty, and the courage to stand for one's truth. One evening, as twilight bathed the estate in soft hues, Harold stood on the veranda, watching the stars emerge. Maria joined him, her presence a comforting anchor. "We've come a long way," she said softly. "We have," Harold agreed. "And there's still so much to do." He looked out into the night, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of the future entwined within the quiet darkness. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Harold felt ready to walk it, with courage, with hope, and with the knowledge that true family is chosen, not given. The first light of dawn filtered gently through the windows of the old Bennett estate, casting a soft glow on the walls that had witnessed so much history. Harold stood in the grand hallway, looking out toward the garden, where newly planted flowers swayed softly in the morning breeze. The house felt different now, not just a relic of family memories or a battleground for inheritance, but a place where hope had begun to take root. Since the court ruled in Harold's favor, granting him protection from his children's claims and recognizing the validity of his new will, a quiet transformation had settled over his life. The bitter confrontations had faded into the past, replaced by the promise of a new beginning, not just for himself but for those he wished to support. Maria approached, carrying a folder filled with documents and brochures. "The plans for the foundation are coming together beautifully," she said, a smile lighting her face. "I can't believe how many people have already offered to help." Harold returned her smile, feeling a surge of gratitude. It's amazing what can happen when kindness leads the way. Together, they had established a foundation dedicated to supporting hardworking domestic workers and others often overlooked by society, those who, like Maria, had given so much without expectation of reward. They named it Legacy of Care, a tribute to the values Harold now held dear. The foundation's mission was simple yet profound: to create a sanctuary where dignity thrived, where every individual was valued and supported. It became a place filled with laughter, stories, and the warmth of community, a living testament to Harold's journey from isolation to connection. One afternoon, as Harold and Maria prepared for the foundation's inaugural community dinner, the house buzzed with activity. Volunteers arranged tables with care, while the kitchen filled with the aroma of homemade dishes. The atmosphere was alive with anticipation and joy. Harold paused by the window, watching guests arrive, people from all walks of life, drawn together by a shared desire for belonging. Among them were familiar faces, neighbors who had witnessed his struggles and triumphs, as well as new friends eager to be part of something meaningful. Maria joined him, her eyes reflecting the same quiet pride. "Look at this, Harold. We've built something truly special." He nodded, his heart full. "A place where everyone matters. Where no one feels like a burden." As the evening unfolded, Harold found himself surrounded by laughter and conversation. He listened to stories of resilience and hope, of people who had found strength in the foundation's embrace. Children played nearby, their carefree joy a reminder of the simple gifts life could offer. Maya, his granddaughter, approached, her face bright with encouragement. "Grandpa, this is incredible. You've turned your pain into purpose." Harold smiled, feeling a warmth that transcended words. "It's never too late to find your voice, Maya. And to use it for good." The community dinner became a tradition, a beacon of light in the lives of many. Harold often reflected on how far he had come, from feeling isolated in his own home to standing surrounded by love and support. The house that had once echoed with silence now hummed with life and hope. One evening, as the stars twinkled overhead, Harold sat on the veranda with Maria and Maya. The three of them shared stories, dreams, and plans for the future. In that moment, Harold felt the fullness of family, not defined by blood alone, but by the ties of love, respect, and shared humanity. He reached out, taking Maya's hand and then Maria's, holding them close as the cool night air wrapped around them. The journey had been long and often painful, but it had led him here, to a place of peace, purpose, and belonging. Harold's voice was soft but certain. "We've built more than a foundation. We've built a home where everyone can find their worth." Maria nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. And it all started with a choice to stand for what matters. As the night deepened, Harold looked out over the garden, the legacy of his life blossoming before him. He had reclaimed his story, his voice, and in doing so, had given others the gift of hope. The path had not been easy, but it had been true. And in that truth, Harold found a joy that no fortune could ever buy, a legacy of love that would endure far beyond the walls of the Bennett estate. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.